What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're jumping in with a roundup of a few things worth knowing about going into Destiny 2 this week. So initially, Bungie speak about the upcoming reveal for Edge of Fate. This one looks like it will hopefully give us a bit more detail about actual new content that we're getting in the expansion. That's something that Bungie have been relatively quiet about. Of course, there will be system changes and things, but there's certainly a hunger in the community to get more details about actual Edge of Fate content, and Bungie have said that they'll do that, so we'll speak about it. Additionally, this week there are a handful of items which will be available for the final time ahead of Edge of Fate, so we'll touch on those, and Bungie are introducing a new Engram for Rite of the Nine, which is the Nonary Engram, containing a bunch of cosmetic items that includes weapon ornaments, a rare exotic skimmer, and previous event items like Crimson Days things which haven't been available for quite some time. So we've got all of that and a few other things to mention from Bungie. As always, I hope you guys enjoy the video, and if you do, keep it locked and loaded. I'll keep you posted when we get more details about Edge of Fate this week, but otherwise, now let's get into it. And so, ahead of Bungie's reveal that's dropping later on today, of course they'll do it live, Bungie have said for Tuesday, July 1st, the live stream will cover some Kepler gameplay and activities, world tiers, and details on the portal, power, and progression. Additionally though, they say tune in at the top for another developer insights videos, so kind of like what we saw last week with Kepler Mysteries, which was sort of a small, short Vidoc for the destination itself. We are going to get another similar one this week, but Bungie have specifically said they'll put a bit more focus on Kepler gameplay, activities, and world tiers. I believe also they'll focus a bit on the campaign. So I think that will be a relatively big moment, if Bungie have got a trick up their sleeve in terms of a piece of content that will excite players on Kepler. It'll be interesting to see if that moves the needle, or not, potentially. But moving on, Bungie say, on July 3rd, Thursday, in the TWID, there'll be another sandbox-focused blog, and they say we'll get exotic weapon tuning previews, as well as legendary weapon frame tuning and perk tuning. Not to mention a few other bullet points of fun topics, which maybe won't be a record breaker in terms of character length for a TWID, but it'll be pretty meaty. So those are a couple of the things that we can expect to see this week. And for clarity, DMG said he'll be back in the chair on Tuesday, and top of the stream will be Edge of Fate focus with boots on the ground, and we'll see combat as well as the new world tier system. So I'm really curious to see how we'll replay some of that Edge of Fate content and what'll keep us engaged with Kepler. Plus hopefully we'll get other answers like whether Kepler is a fully explorable destination in the traditional sense, if it has matchmaking and all these kinds of things. Plus, they did confirm that they'll talk about the campaign and whether we get a normal or legendary version and all of that kind of stuff. So, some relatively important details that'll be dropping this week, and I will keep you posted. On a quick side note, briefly right here, the Destiny 2 team on X did share a new buried bloodline ornament that we'll get in Edge of Fate, so they said stay tuned for more details. I imagine it's just going to be in the next DLC. Some very neon colours on that one. Hopefully that'll fulfill a few fashion goals for a few folks, so give us your thoughts about it down below, and I guess we'll see how we get it in Edge of Fate. Also this week, we're going to get a new Engram from Rite of the Nine. This will contain some relatively rare loot, but some other quick mentions first. This will be the final week where we can pick up the Lotus Eater in its current form, and given that this is one of the weapons that has appeared the least in terms of the reward rotation, it may be one that some folks want to go after, as we don't know when it will be reprised in Edge of Fate and turned into a tier 5 weapon, which is essentially Bungie's plan for weapons like this moving forward. So if you want a good Lotus Eater, this is going to be the final week where we're guaranteed to be able to actually get the weapons dropped. Otherwise, the same can be said for Sheora's Wrath Adept, which will be the featured Trials weapon starting on Friday. And other things in rotations worth mentioning, Vesper's Host is featured this week. I believe the drop for Icebreaker is now fixed, and again, given that that was bugged for a relatively long time ahead of Edge of Fate, it may be one that players want to go after, because of course we don't know how dungeons and things will rotate in the featured activities list moving forward. So if you do want to get Icebreaker, this is going to be a good week to try and pick it up. We can say the same for Finality's Augur in the next couple of weeks from Sundered Doctrine, as right now this can be farmed every week, but will probably go into some kind of rotation after Edge of Fate drops, which will limit its availability. And another featured raid exotic this week will be Touch of Malice. So if you want any of those, again, with rotations and core playlists changing, this is a good week to dive in and try to pick them up. But our final mention for the moment is for the Nonary Engram, which will be introduced into Rite of the Nine this week. Of course, there's been plenty of feedback about Rite of the Nine, and specifically the weapons, given that we're seeing a whole bunch of weapon system changes. Next week, we'll get the Loot Palooza event, which will increase the drop rates of all of the Rite of 9 rewards very significantly. But this week, keep in mind the Emissary will feature another couple of the exotics from that featured pool. So if any of those on screen, including things like World Line 0, may be of interest, then it's worth checking in with the Emissary after reset. Otherwise, this week sees the introduction of the Nonary Engrams. So Bungie have said this is filled to the brim with hand-picked cosmetic rewards, and they span multiple years of D2 content. Some things are newer, like holo chips, while some are a blast from the past, such as the Crimson Days emote. So, starting July 1st, players may purchase Nonary Engrams using 350 Nonary manifolds at the Emissary, and then the following week, July 8th, players will be awarded one additional Engram each day just for signing in. So next week we'll get a whole bunch dropped, but if you've got any spare currency and you fancy any of the cosmetic items that are featured, it may be worth jumping in to spend some this week. If you're curious about that featured list, you can actually see it in the background, starting here with some weapon emotes like Kingmaker, which is for the Queenbreaker, also things like Patient Zero for Outbreak Perfected, a whole bunch of other weapon ornaments, and as we mentioned, things like holochips, rare items from Solstice and Crimson Days in the past, and a bunch of other things. So I actually recapped those previously. I'm going to run the rest of that recap to finish this video, just for anyone who is interested in picking those up, given that it's featured this week. So guys, if you've enjoyed the video, a rating really does help us out. Let us know if you're diving in to get anything wrapped up in these final couple of weeks before Edge of Fate. And get subscribed as well if you do want to be kept up to date. But otherwise, thanks for watching, and I hope you guys have an awesome day. Additionally though, there is the Defenity ornament, Atropos, and then we move into other types of cosmetics. One of them is the Winged Wolf, which of course is the Galahorn themed skimmer that originally released, wow, it's over a year ago now, isn't it? Outside of this popping up randomly in Eververse or something, there's no other way to obtain it, so some folks might want it. Then moving away from weapons, as Bungie mentioned, some of the holo chips will be in here. I think actually there are only 2 of them in the game, aren't there? There's the Ardent Adoration, as well as the Taking Flight holo chip. The Ardent Adoration one actually lists 3 of them dropping inside of that package, so I'm guessing that will apply to if you get them from Rite of the 9 as well. Heading into other cosmetics though, firstly, there is the Wolven Shell, so that's one of the Witcher-inspired cosmetics. There'll also be the Crimson Shell from Crimson Days back in the day. I almost forget how many years it's been since we actually got these. Given that some folks weren't actually playing the game back then though, I'm sure there'll be a few items that some folks don't have. Additionally, we have the Simulation Shell, which I think was a Curse of Osiris one from back in the day, with the Vex theme, which is cool. There'll also be the Drop Pod Shell. Then moving on to ships, again there are some which are linked to events, so there's the Soul Piercer exotic ship, which of course was a Solstice of Heroes drop. Also from back in Season of the Forge, the Black Armory era, is Adawan's Lone Wolf. And then we have the Death to Kel's Fallen ship, which is a pretty cool one, as well as the Ariana's Vengeance, which is, I think, a vanilla exotic ship from Destiny 2. Otherwise, another one from the Curse of Osiris era is the Sails of Osiris ship. And then we move on to the Sparrows. So firstly, there is the Roach VGH. Again, that one is linked to the Witcher pack. And then we have the Skitter Scare, or the Spider Sparrow from Festival of the Lost. More Solstice loot though include Era's Grace. And then we get the Tex Mechanica themed Bronco exotic Sparrow as well, which is quite a nice looking one. The final vehicle though is the SK1 Multiband Rover. So like I said, a reasonably large loot pool, and that's just looking at the ornaments, ghost shells and ships. And so let us know in the comment section your thoughts on those, the new Engram, the exotic drops, and the boosts that we'll get for the remainder of Rite of the 9. If you found the video helpful, a rating really does help us on the channel. Also be sure to get subscribed so I can keep you posted with a bunch more Destiny content, especially as we approach Edge of Fate. For now though, thank you for watching, and I will catch you guys very soon.